Another draft physics presentation. Yes, another Daftloday video. I guess I have to quit watching them for a while because it is a silly distraction and a waste of time. Especially, like I said, DraftScience removes all doubt. All doubt about what? That, yes, it is a terrible burden to have a brain, and that this is why science is a religion. It's because clearly these people are fanatics. They think it's crazy to believe in evolution. They think you have to be an idiot to believe in evolution, as opposed to a theory that explains absolutely none of the essential elements with anything but fairy stories about magical fields that cause all kinds of magical things to happen, and that nothing is just a basic function, everything's a very complex function. Even though it all looks very basic in the big universe. Yeah, and most of even our common universe is very basic. We know that grandma isn't going to walk out to the driveway and flick her finger at the Mercedes Benz and make it move 70 miles an hour. There's a reason why it's hard to accelerate matter. Jesus. So it's just, there's nothing to say. They have as their explanation for the universe a bent field of space that kind of is just the extraction of space, and that makes things appear to move because you eliminated the space between them. And if they move away from each other, it's because the little homunculus is riding on the bodies, right? Whatever a body is. Like, is a sponge the sponge body, or is the sponge the little cells inside the sponge? Are they the body? Where's the bodies? And somebody walks up and says, hey, no, the bodies are, there's these little elemental bits, fundamental bits, you see. There's little matter bits and little force bits, and they're a little bit different. A little tiny bit different. The force bits have two polarizations, and the matter bits have two polarizations called electrons and protons. And basically everything that happens because of the interaction between those little bits and the bigger bits. Well, you gotta be an idiot to believe something logical.
You just gotta be finding this as hilarious as I am.
Yeah, the part where you have the Mark Twain quote over yourself, where you couldn't even present yourself as much, doing the robe thing. That's funny. I mean, it's funny for somebody in that context to be calling somebody else an idiot. You just sort of have idiot written all over you as an aesthetic. Just letting you know.
No, it's not side-splittingly funny, but it is really funny.
Well, it's great argument.
You got a 60-year-old man trying to convince himself.
58. And I didn't convince myself of anything except, boy, you people will fall for anything. I look at a world that's mostly religious kooks, and then I wonder, well, why the intellectuals keep doing stupid things? Why they keep letting the civilization turn to shit? Why are they losing to idiocracy? Oh, I guess it's because basically they're idiots too. They're only fakely smart. Like, they can read and then they can mimic, like monkeys, but they can't do much better than that. They apparently have no rational imagination. The only imagination they have creates fairies and pixies and Sasquatches and UFOs and magic things, little unicorns bouncing about, farting space into space. Maybe it's the little pink uniforms. They just fart the extra space that pushes things apart. Yeah, I wonder about that. Yes, it occurred to me after 58 years that I'm living on a planet full of completely ungrounded, silly idiots.
understands physics. He understands orthodox physics, and he's demolished it. And you,
Again, this word orthodox physics, which is what? F equals ma? What? The inverse square law? What's orthodox physics? It doesn't contain any magical pixies farting space into the space?
and provided a unified theory of forces. And
Yes, and you haven't demonstrated in some way how it's not a unifying theory, that it doesn't provide a quite excellent explanation for why magnets attract and repel, and why protons and electrons act the way they do, and fundamentally how gravity functions. Yes, it does all of that, and you haven't explained how it doesn't do all of that. The definition sort of a unification theory is that yes, it explains all the phenomenon using the simplest elemental bits pretty much imaginable. Yes, it's the straightest, fattest, cleanest line from point A, what's happening, to, oh, that's it. Yeah. And you idiots are still doing this and saying you're productive somehow. You got your brain caps on. I don't think so.
can actually discuss the basic terms of reference.
Like body and F, this vacuous Fness in newtons. Yeah. No, I just say, okay, that's the way you want to play, huh? Calories, newtons, kelvins, whatever, kilometers per second, miles per hour, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you can't even come up with a common way to measure distance or speed or anything.
At hand. The quote of Mark Twain comes to mind. It's better to keep your mouth than be thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, I'm going to bury you under that. Okay, this will be printed, in my opinion. Okay, those who have any respect for intelligence in the universe, they'll print this and glue it permanently. Shellac it right to your fucking tombstone, you dumbass. This is the definition of a fucking imbecile. Somebody who opens his fucking mouth, okay, and provides permanent evidence that they just couldn't give a fuck about the truth because they're petty fatheads in little silly robes who have little tiny wieners and just can't get over it. Because if this fucking theory came out of anybody else's fucking gob, you wouldn't be making these idiotic videos. And you know it, you petty weasel.
To remove all doubt by
You really are retarded. You're playing, I have a special kind of retardation. No, you have regular retardation. You're a dummy, okay? You're, what's the other word they use for the not demented, but yes, you have a completely degraded capacity to do logic, retard.
Sometimes my brain works slowly.
Yeah, exactly. So
sometimes it's because
sometimes it's because I'm a lazy fat guy, and that's the only reason. So he's playing his retard card again, right over, like I said, with Mark Twain's words hanging over his head. Yes, just remove all doubt. Thank you for removing all doubt. I'm having a conversation with an actual retard on the internet. Someone who actually declares himself retarded. So yes, I am doing something really silly. No real point. Little balloon holding retard is having a physics conversation. Yeah. Keep pretending. You fucking goddamn scarecrow. You just can only wish you had a brain.
Of the way I have to speak and the way, essentially, to be guarded. And understand the way.
Laughing again. I mean, to be guarded. So he's talking about, I understand being careful and not sticking a screwdriver in my eye or a random dildo up my ass. And then he proceeds to make these kinds of videos, which again, I just I want posterity to keep playing them over and over again as an example of why human fails dismally. These arrogant fucktards. Definition of it. Put him in the dictionary right next to the fucking phrase. Arrogant fucktard.
Is going to deal with my statements. So when out of the blue, or if I open with a question, or suddenly I pose a firm question.
I don't think you suddenly ever do anything. I mean, your video is sped up and you're still slow. I wonder why that is. Are all your homunculuses all out of extra space to create so you can move a little faster and think a little faster? Are all the neurons all out of the bag of empty space to, shove behind them or in front of them, to make themselves move?
Decidedly so, because it can't be really avoided. I realise that if I make a statement like force equals mass times acceleration, not force times velocity.
Yeah, so again, yes, if you make a statement that just doesn't mean anything, again, you're making these huge distinctions between these two kinds, these two forms, I don't know, these two, it's like noting a pill bottle made out of glass versus a pill bottle made out of plastic. Yeah, there's still pill bottle. So this idea of saying the force part doesn't count, when there's velocity versus acceleration, would be kind of idiotic. It doesn't change the force, but we understand that one's the generation, the process of generating force, and the other one's the process of having force. Both of them have force. Only one of them is generating it, converting it, taking the empty that we don't see, the elemental bits, and turning it into something we can see that's moving. Shit.
Acceleration. Such a statement will be prone to, well, that's rubbish. I'm going to feel the force when the rocket hits me. Yeah, it's going 3,000 miles per hour and it hits me. It might not be accelerating, but of course it's got force. But, of course, like I contend all along, he doesn't understand what we mean by force.
Yeah, what you mean by force is the space shuttle isn't actually moving. The space is disappearing in front of it. Okay, and the space is filling up behind it. Alright, so the space shuttle isn't really moving. Alright, somehow I don't have any space moving in front of me and to the side of me, and so somehow my space isn't filling up on one side and emptying on the other side, so I'm not moving with the space shuttle, and therefore the space shuttle crashes into me because I can't make space to make me move out of the way. Yeah, that's your silly, wacky, crazy, stupid, imbecilic explanation of reality. It's a fucking idiotic explanation. Plainly idiotic. And you fell for it because you're a retard.
Force. A force acts on a body. So if the body under discussion is the rocket at fixed velocity,
it doesn't act on a body. See, again, he can't even figure out. You can say it over and over again. The forces are all nuclear. I said it in the last video. Why don't you contend that they're not? They don't give a fuck about body. All they care about is atomic weight. Atomic weight is electrons and protons. That's all they care about. And yes, the neutrons. But a neutron is essentially a proton and an electron. So it's the same fucking thing. It's just electrons and protons. That's all. It only acts on, the force only acts on electrons and protons. That's my theory. That's how I think the universe works. And if you're going to say you have a much better theory that it somehow acts on the big body, the whole body, or some other kind of bullshit, then why don't you explain how that works? How it's not a nuclear force. How it isn't proven to be a nuclear force by the very fact that I can separate every element of the space shuttle and it still will do what it was doing before, because the movement's in all the little bits. It's not in the space shuttle. It's in the bits that make up the space shuttle.
it experiences no forces, is what we mean, and is what we believe is experimentally confirmed as a principle.
Experimentally confirmed by what? By what evidence? So again, I keep saying your evidence is preposterously weak. You saw the shadow of Sasquatch, and you smelled the odor of duty and said, gee, I saw a shadow and I smelled duty. It must be a Sasquatch. I mean, you're jumping to preposterous, storytelling based on minimalistic evidence, tiny little shreds of evidence. You see a little tiny piece of pink, and all of a sudden there's a whole fucking unicorn.
In many ways, just straightforward, evidentially, observed bodies continuing in the motion with, and also under principles such as conservation, which...
Yeah, so again, bodies just continuing with the motion, except there's the counter evidence that somehow it takes a whole bunch of energy to move this stuff. I mean, if it was just so easy, everything you just hit it and it just keeps going forever, that somehow it was just some magic thing that happens to stuff. Once it has motion, it just, I go forever. No mechanism involved, then you wouldn't have to shove a whole bunch of energy in there to get it going. Why does it take so much energy to get matter moving? Why don't you explain why it takes so much energy? Why I can't just flick it into motion? Why it somehow, the motion has to spread over the entire atomic weight? Why do heavy things with lots of electrons and protons, how is it not some sort of, why don't you explain how it's just a bizarre coincidence that there seems to be a very tight relationship between how many protons and electrons there are and how much actual force I have to fucking goddamn impose on the object to get it to go anywhere.
This law has, and this law doesn't have. But the fact that...
I mean, how does your magical bent space bucket brigade, or however it works, this compression of space, how does the compression of space know that it has to compress space more in front of the heavy thing? How does it know that the heavy thing needs more force? It needs more energy put into it, which it needs a bigger cliff to fall into or something. How does your silly homunculus world, how did they acquire knowledge of the atomic weight of an object? And put in the appropriate amount of counter space, or push in the extra space. How does it do that? Your special little force minions.
A 60-year-old man would object, thinking he knows physics, by remarking.
Yes, thinking I'm not an idiot. I don't fall for completely preposterous, idiotic fables that are nothing better than God theories of reality. You're all a bunch of religious kooks.
That he would feel a force, and the rocket would feel a force, if they was engaged in a collision, is the quintessential example of not knowing what he's talking about, not knowing what's under discussion.
Oh, right. So F equals MA doesn't have anything to do with two cars going 70 miles an hour in opposite directions and crashing into each other, and the expression of that event is basically what the F means. That's what went in, and now that's what's going to come out. It took force to move the little fuckers, and now it's going to remove force when they neutralize, when they equalize, when they do the math. Minus and then plus and mess. Yes, minus plus plus equals mess.
The quintessential evidence of a man suffering the severe delusional bias of the Dunning-Kruger effect, you might say.
Okay, so another resort to silly fallacies and dumbass cliches. So yes, I'd argue you're a tiny bit of knowledge. A little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous thing, but a tiny bit of knowledge is even more dangerous. You can quote me. The more retarded the asshole is, yeah, the sooner should lock him up in a cage. He needs a playpen and training wheels. He shouldn't be allowed on the real highway.
So on about awareness, I realise that sometimes.
So far, no physics in this slop. So another video with no physics where he talks about how he knows physics and yet he's not doing any.
I need to use the word subtle or naive. And
retarded.
You have to understand, and I come to realise that there's various words, and it's as predictable as if he was a robot programmed to do it. If I say subtle, he says it's not subtle. If I say it's complex, he says it's simple.
Well, what I'm saying clearly is that every bit of this, that's right, the interferometer, for example, you could argue it's a simple experiment, yes, in a manner of speaking. But when people are going to speak about it as if they have analyzed the parts and they understand what they're doing. You even talked about tire wheels. Yeah, it's a simple in a concept, but clearly when you do analyze the motion of every little element in the tire, it's not simple anymore, is it? It's a little bit complicated because there's a lot of changes taking place for each element of that tire, and that's the expression of heat and other things that come out of it, because there is a lot of motion change, a lot of acceleration changes taking place. So yeah, you people want to generalize everything into fucking baby talk, all right? And you want to keep using your jargon words that I would argue are not explicit anymore. Coherent light or diffraction. You want to use words that have been that don't have consistent definition. So it's in a philosophy conversation, talking about things like love or something. They're meaningless rubbish words.
If I say it's simple, he says, oh no, it's not simple, it's complex. Okay? Now every time I use, and when I talk about the naive notions, not as a slight, but meaning those notions which might first occur.
Again, somebody who's stupid enough to think that he could use the word naive to somebody, like he could go to the Queen's, he gets invited to the Queen's palace, and he goes to the Queen, you have a wonderfully naive notion of cleanliness. yeah, she's going to fall for that. She's going to think you complimented her. Yes, it's probably true because, the English seem to be preposterously stupid, beyond just the dumbasses that we have here in the real Western world. You Easterners seem really fucking retarded.
Do you try? He says, I'm insulting him. He says, it is simple like this, it is complex. All these words, which lead to anything between 30 seconds to a 5-minute discussion, wherein it's just plainly refuted as not the case. And
well, again, you constantly make accusations, so it's like somebody gets to come into court and they have 3 minutes and they just go, you're a pedophile, you're a child molester, you're a wife beater, they just go right down the list of making a ton of accusations. That's all they do. They don't spend any time actually talking about the subject of the trial. They just make a bunch of character accusations. And then what, the defendant gets 3 minutes to defend himself against the accusations? Fuck you, asshole.
He just brings up his own talking points. Right?
Yes.
When one of these words is used, there's attention to be given to what follows. Because what follows is the justification for these things, you see. For these comments.
Alright, so again, I play his fucking retarded videos where he's making some sort of argument that's supposed to remove all doubt about him having the authority of a pile of evidence, and that there's no weakness in this evidence and it all fits together, and his theory of science is reasonable because, yes, there are little, bucket gnomes that dump space around everything to keep it moving around in the right way. That monitor whether you have enough space on your left or you have enough space on your right. And these little fairies take care of this business for you, little bucket fairies.
And once he's paused and spoken for a few minutes about how ridiculous it is for me to use one of these words, he's forgotten
how unproductive the word is. Yes, that I've pointed out how, well, you can't really have a discussion if we don't have any common language. And I make it as simple as I can possibly make it. I say force bit and I say matter bit. No, we have to keep saying now body, a force acts on a body. No, it doesn't act on a body. It's more complicated than that. Gravity doesn't act on the Earth. It acts on the subatomic structure of the Earth.
That he's supposed to be paying attention for what I'm about to now justify as what we have, the proposition. I had a proposition that something was true, and here's the discussion that follows to support that proposition. But knowing what...
Yes, and in what way did I avoid your fucking bullshit conversation? I point out I don't like your language, and then second, I point out your argument is shit. F doesn't equal VA. That's retarded. There's no force involved when something has a velocity. Well, sure there is a force involved, idiot.
He just continues to look for such words, little facts, whatever, words to say, not the case. He talks about wanting a jury trial.
Yes, I constantly metaphor argument to the process of trial. And in the best sense of that word, where you are attempting to prove a case and you're trying to do it in some sort of honest manner. That's what I mean by trial. I don't mean defense lawyers rigging the jury and paying them off or doing some kind of shenanigans. I'm talking about the ideal of a disciplined forum for which the facts will be weighed, and that we first have to weigh what people are calling a fact. When they say we did this experiment and they never did it, then somebody has to point out, no, you can't use that evidence because you don't have any evidence there's such a thing as an entangled photon. You can't just say, I have a magic crystal that creates entangled photons and now I'm going to do an experiment with my entangled photons. First you have to prove that your magic crystal creates those things. And you haven't done that.
And his closing argument is come on, are you really saying that? You're not saying that's true. It goes through two slaves. Come on. Believe me.
Yeah, my closing argument is that you're given this preposterous explanation that is completely made of woo and fantasy that can't be demonstrated to be anything to do with what photons do. 99% of the time, they're not splitting in two. So why would you accept a rational explanation that doesn't involve photons doing something you never see them really do in the real world? You have a tiny bit of evidence that there's such a thing as an abominable snowman, and you see a little tiny white hair poking out from behind a tree. And here you're just jumping to the conclusion, it must be the abominable snowman, when you know there's about 10 million white dogs walking around. There's lots of things with little white hairs that could be sitting there. Little Einstein could be bent over behind the tree taking a poo. Fuck, dumbasses.
You're not saying that. That's his closing argument.
You can't be this fucking stupid. That's my closing. My fucking closing argument is to the judge and the jury is, you can't be this fucking stupid. I mean, I'm showing you how fucking preposterous these fairy stories is. This silly religion they've built with their Jehovah of bent space and their Holy Ghost of the magic wave property. I've explained to you how it's absolute rubbish, and I pointed to you to this rational explanation that just has to do with 4 little laws of physics, 4 little laws of commonly understandable interaction based on filtering and polarization. You can't be this fucking stupid and sit there and eat that crap and say, oh, I have to go with the unicorn theory. You can't be such fucking morons.
Yeah, I offered him a chance to take a clear stand on this. Yeah. And whilst falling...
I can't even believe he'd say that somehow I didn't take a stand. I've made assertive claims for what my theory states is the truth. I've certainly taken a fucking stand, you crazy fuck. Again, this is why everything you say is premised with some sort of imbecilic rendering of the events that took place. How you could even start a sentence with, I gave him an opportunity to take a stand, as if he didn't take a stand on every single issue. That's exactly what this interruptions are for, is to take a fucking stand and say, no, I don't agree with that crap. Your premise is shit. No, you have to go somewhere else. I'm not accepting your X on the body bullshit.
into the trap in one sense. Later on, or as posed as a definite question, he refused to take a stand. But later on in the discussion, he made plain.
Okay, again, citing the non-existent evidence table with the non-existent evidence. Well, I've shown you the gun and the bullets and all of that stuff, didn't I? No, you don't have any evidence of that, craphead. Another retarded move. You imagined you made an argument of some kind that has something to do with some kind of evidence, but you never actually did it, jackass. Why don't you watch your video? You'll see. You never held the gun and showed the gun. Never happened, fuckhead.
His attachments to this, and in such, he provided just complete obfuscation of the issues. The issues that he has a notion of force.
How did I obfuscate? I detailed the exact mechanism of how the force is captured by material objects through this process of all the objects, all the atoms are in tension, all the electrons are in tension, all the protons are in tension, and that tension has a bias in directions. How did I evade this subject? You lying sack of shit. So we're right back to the fact that you're not only really stupid, you have no character and lie compulsively. You, sir, are a compulsive liar and a retard and a fathead and a fucknut.
And orthodox science has a notion of force.
Okay, where is it? Where? Again, he says they have a notion of force. What? Virtual photons, virtual made-up particles that somehow do something and then we just eliminate them later because, you know, that's convenient. It's like gravity. We just get a bunch of free energy coming in, but we know as long as we wait long enough, the force has to leave again, so we'll give it back when it leaves. I mean, just because you have a convenience circumstance where the local environment is closed, you have this excuse to just make up fake things and say it's just magic energy. I don't have to. There's no source. There's no real force that's actually moving the Earth towards the sun. There's nothing real that has to happen. We just create a bunch of unreal. We just imagine Earth move to sun. I imagine it, therefore it happens. It doesn't require any physics. You have a religious theory, a God theory of motion, and he sits there and says, "Well, we have a whole theory." No, God is not a theory. God is not an explanation. It's a cop-out. It's the exact opposite of an explanation. It's when you don't have a theory, you say something like, "Well, I think God did it." That's somebody who is hopelessly. There's nothing in their explanation bucket. That's when they say God did it. When they have no clue.
And when I wish to commune about force, I'm speaking about this, and thus it needs to be refuted on its own terms.
Refuted how? I'm not refuting the fact that mass and acceleration creates something where now it has force in it. When you accelerated it, you had to apply a force to accelerate it. Now you think the magic bucket brigade shows up and just puts magic space, and so there is no force. But I think the force of gravity is a real concept. There's an actual force that pushes the matter. The matter absorbs the force, carries the force, and that's why it moves. Fucker nutter.
If a man wants to speak about his own force, speak about his own force. What he can't do is, in trying to refute when I mean this, talk about his own ideas about what force is. And
so he titles a video, okay, versus video, where somehow it's me against this conventional thing or something, the fundamentalists or whatever, and then he degrades me and you know, plays this little game because somehow I played along and explained what I think it means, what I think that F means, that there's an actual force. It's not just some magical thing that's imparted into matter. It's a real thing that the matter has. It's real. That's why it takes time to move heavy things. That's why it takes what appears to be energy. That's why there's a big flame coming out of the space shuttle when it moves. It's because there's a real force that has to be put into things. It's not just magical space removal. Fuckhead.
Over. Not only does that, he actually talks as though he's encapsulated and completely in agreement and able to use, for example, the notions of strings, yeah, and tension and compression and all these.
Oh wait, I'm not allowed, okay, to use magnetism as part of my theory, and that's what magnetism is. It creates tension between two magnets. Yes, the entire subatomic universe is magnetic. They're the magnetic monopoles, as I stated overtly. I repeatedly said it in my video. Yes, I believe all of the subatomic functions are the result of magnetic function. That is, the magnetic monopoles of the electron. I called them that. The magnetic monopoles of electrons and protons. And they create a tremendous amount of tension between them because there's force between them. And when you compress the force like a little ping pong ball bouncing back and forth, you'll feel more pressure. There'll be actually more energy because you get hit more times by exactly the same force of the ping pong ball. The closer I put my fingers together, I'm not just creating more noise or a higher frequency. I'm actually creating more force hitting things because they get hit more often per unit of time. Dumb fuck. I mean, if I had a 300-pound pendulum swinging in my house and I sped it up and it hit me, every second, clearly it's got more force the faster it goes, the more often it cycles per unit of time. If it hits this neutral point per unit of time more often, it means it can impart more force.
Things which are studied and embodied in my notion of force, he thinks he gets to assume that they work in his scanner too, without ever providing.
Again, amazing. So somehow I can't. They've copyrighted magnetism. I'm not allowed to use it. Shit. I can't. If I'm going to have to come up with a theory, I can't use magnetism. It's like somebody say you can make a car, but you can't use the round wheel. I mean, we've copyrighted it. It's ours. We claim title. I mean, this is just insipidly insane.
Foundation for how springiness works in his schema. How
yeah, I don't worry about springiness. Okay, so yeah, there's no springiness. This isn't. I don't have a string theory. It's not a rubber band theory. It's a pressure theory. I just explained entirely how it works. It's always about how the little force bits get trapped between the other bits and they reflect. And so the further away the bits are, the slower the impacts. The closer they get, the quicker the impacts. Not complicated. More impacts per second. Proximity increases impacts per second. That's it. No springs, no rubber bands. Force moving between the objects. Completely consistent with all experimental evidence.
Energy conservation works, how momentum exists, because that's the confusion when he says, I feel the force when a space rocket hits me at constant velocity. You're talking absurd. No, well, yes, you do feel the force, and so does the rocket, but there is no force until that point on the rocket.
Okay, so there's no force inside the rocket when it's moving until it hits something. That's his argument. Where clearly, yes, no, my argument is it's in the matter. That's why there's time dilation, is because the matter is very busy making velocity. Velocity doesn't come from nowhere. It's not a nothing event. It actually gets imparted into things. They change because of the velocity. I've said this exact sentence over and over again. So demonstrate how it's impossible that there's changes taking place inside of something when it changes its vector of motion. Relative or not. In an absolute sense of change, in a relative sense of a change. Every change is is a change in this. This has a position in the universe and a velocity in the universe, and its location and its vector is data inside of this thing. And if we had the physics to do it, it would be readable. It's in there and it's detectable. We just haven't acquired the technology yet to see it, but it's in there. Asshole.
It has. You feel the force because it has momentum, and you have inertia. If in a frame of reference you're standing still compared to the rocket, yeah. And in the sense that it has momentum, it also has energy. All these terms, when momentum talk,
it clearly has energy and momentum, and it's not, again, relative relative. The fact is you can make some argument that the giant flame on the space shuttle is really slowing it down to get it to leave the Earth. Now, you could make the argument, but clearly the point is it requires a ton of force to make that change. So whether the space shuttle is actually going 768,000 miles an hour towards the Earth, and you have to use a big rocket to slow it down to make it not keep up with the Earth anymore, to fly away from the Earth because the Earth is going this way at 670 miles an hour. It doesn't matter. The truth of the matter is that somehow the big giant flame changes the space shuttle. It goes somewhere. The force doesn't go nowhere. It goes into the space shuttle. The fucking giant flame that went this way and moved a lot of matter and heated it and keeps all those photons are flying out for a long, long time after that flame is long gone. There's still a huge amount of activity because all that stuff can't be killed because the force can't die. Well, obviously the opposite and equal forces also can't die. And where is it? Well, it's inside the space shuttle. The same amount of flame that shot out of the back end, it's the same amount of crap is inside of that space shuttle, you dumb fuck. It's full of energy. It's full of a directionality imposed by the event. It did a bunch of accelerating, which is exchanging this way for that way. It gave away this way and that way and all the other ways to go that way. Rational explanation. No bucket fairies.
It's about energy. One moment he thinks he's talking to me about what I mean in energy, and the next moment he's talking about little balls. When I talk about mass as a number allocated to an object, 1 minute Minimum thinks he's talking about mass as
well, whatever. I don't talk about little balls and all this other bullshit. As explained, I can't give you a description of their exact form or shape, but clearly what I've stated is one kind interact with another kind. Little ones interact with big ones, so to speak, but little ones don't interact with little ones and big ones don't interact with big ones.
Orthodox science understand it as a very complicated, subtle notion, not what you were told in high school.
So he says mass is a subtle, complicated notion, and when he's saying that, he doesn't mean like subtle and complicated, like atomic structure is complicated and how the electrons and the protons are arranged is complicated. What he thinks it is because mass requires some Higgsy thing, and there's a whole bunch of fieldy crap that makes mass. So mass isn't something the little bits actually have. So here they give magical powers to photons to do all kinds of radar things. They have all kinds, they're like battleships. They got all kinds of shoot rockets and they can do all kinds of shit. And then the big things, they give them no properties at all. They don't even have mass on their own. They need some tugboat to pull them through the universe because they can't do it on their own. They need the Higgs tugboat to get around. So it's just so ironic. They've turned the big things into rowboats, and they've turned the little things into stealth fighters. And I say that's just plainly retarded. It's such a backward logic. You're looking in all the wrong places. You're looking upside down. You're looking backwards. You're not doing the eye thing well at all. You're just totally not getting how it works. You might as well be using your eyeball as a whoopee cushion. You got no clue what it is.
1 minute he thinks he's discussing that, and then the next minute he means a little ball. When I talk about the force, as discussed just previously in my notion...
Again, I'll just say there's no such thing as what he just described. I've been consistently saying the same thing for years about the basic mechanism, that there's force bits and that there's matter bits. So this is just a lie, this pretense that there's something inconsistent, there's something unexplained. No, I've gone through too tedious redundancy to point it out over and over that force doesn't interact with force in any way that could possibly be relevant, and that matter doesn't interact with matter in any way that could possibly be relevant, and that the only relevant interaction is the interactions between force and matter. They tell each other what the universe is going to look like. Their lack of compatibility is the excitement in the universe.
1 minute he thinks he's force as a quantifiable number with a direction, as discussed and detailed, and as described as almost defined by this equation, what it means to experience a force, what it means to have an acceleration.
So again, he's saying somehow that F equals ma has somehow explained why things possess velocity and why they maintain their velocity, when you haven't touched that at all, when you haven't gone anywhere near explaining why two magnets move into each other. You haven't explained any of that whatsoever in any way at all. You have absolutely zero as an explanation beyond some notion that the space contracts or the space expands. You have nothing as an explanation.
Well, Emmanuel will be talking and thinking he's meeting this term, but in the next minute it's clear what he's talking about is little balls. When I talk about photons...
so again, reduce it to what? Tons or little balls or little... Yes, they're actually functional things. That's right. Photons carry energy. They carry a momentum. They will move electrons. That's the truth of it. The little balls of photons do that. That's how the universe works. Little things, like in the big universe, little things can crash into big things and put craters on them and split them in half sometimes and move them out of orbits. Comets could hit the Earth and, burn it to a cinder by pushing its orbit too close to the sun. That's the truth of it. That's how the world works. Crazy, stupid, dumb fucker. Yes, it's not as mechanical as the big universe. The little pieces don't blow off into littler pieces. It's made of solid little pieces. Little chrome pieces.
As having the property of energy, the property of momentum, and a frequency, and this, that, and the other. 1 minute him might be thinking he's talking to me and addressing my term, and in the next minute what he's talking about is a pair of little balls. So
again, it goes with it. He just keeps reducing it to like it doesn't mean anything, and I've explained how it can mean a huge amount. If you were standing next to another person and I made these little ping pong balls and they were bouncing back and forth between you because they had potential energy, and there was 500,000 of them, you'd take notice. You'd feel the pain, asshole. You'd know the difference between being 10 feet away from the person and being 5 feet away from the person. You'd feel the difference. Dumb fuck. And your counter theory is... Oh, yeah, you don't have any. So you mock and trivialize a real theory, one that actually has mechanisms, and when you have God did it. Magic space bucket thingy. The fairy of blah. The virtual leprechauns. You have nothing.
And these notions have to be kept separate. You have to provide distinction for, listen, this is how I annihilate you on your terms and tell you why you're wrong.
Yes, I annihilate you on your preposterous notion that you have provided some sort of coherent, rational theory of motion. You have none. You provide nothing. You can't even explain your geometric gravity welly thing. Is it making space? Is it destroying space? How exactly does the electron, one electron inside of the material object, why don't you draw me a picture of the one electron and explain to me how it goes from position A to position whatever, B, closer to the sun. Why don't you explain how it gets from here to there and what force acted on it to make it go there? I can do that. You can't.
In basic logic about what you're saying, and here is my proposition for a preferable alternate view. The alternate view is not an argument against what I say.
I will always argue against what you're saying when you say force acts on a body. It doesn't do that. Force acts on electrons and protons. It doesn't give a fuck about bodies. Bodies are irrelevant. Electrons and protons are moved. They move. The body, the school of fish, goes where the fish go. The fish decide where the school of fish goes. The fish do. The school, the body, doesn't decide anything.
And so when I say he has no theory of a body, he's not explained it. It's quite ridiculous that
he has no theory except the one he's plainly articulated, that it's made out of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and force bits, ping pong balls versus cue balls. Yes, that's the universe. And the ping pong balls come in blue and red, and the cue balls come in blue and red. And there's 4 rules about how they interact with each other. I haven't done something yet. I've done it as explicitly as I can possibly do it in terms of explaining the checkerboard and the motion of the checkers. I've given you the rules of the game, and all I'm saying is, yes, there's zillions of little squares, so it's really hard to follow everything that happens, but the themes and how it goes from this configuration to the bigger picture, how it goes from fish getting into the school and the school moving, I've given you a blueprint of that function.
He draws these 2 diagrams, yeah, and says this is it explained, and that he's done it before. Yeah.
What 2 diagrams? I can't see 2 diagrams in that gibberish. So what? What diagrams? Oh, here, the right turn. So he doesn't believe in the notion that perpendicular, the fact that the energy of the wrong polarization. So when red energy goes into a black body, or black energy goes into a red body, that it comes out perpendicularly. And that idea of perpendicular means that it's possible that you could end up eventually right back where you started. That is circular motion, because you took right turns, or left turns, or this turn and that turn. That wouldn't possibly be possible somehow. That's a ludicrous explanation of how force is trapped in matter. No, I think it's the perfectly rational explanation for how force gets trapped. It falls into cul-de-sacs and just keeps spinning around in the cul-de-sac. Not at all an insane Sasquatch theory. No buckets, no fairies, no bullshit. It seems a pretty rational explanation. If somebody calls me up and says, "Oh, it's taken me 4 hours to get to your house," there seems to be some kind of reoccurrence thing happen. I have to explain to them, yes, there's an on-ramp into the cul-de-sac, and you have to look, there's a sign that says off, and you have to take the off-ramp, or you just end up in a circle, fuckhead. Yeah, it's perfectly rational explanation versus your crickets. Chirp, chirp. I believe in God. Chirp, chirp. God done it. Chirp, chirp. God, God, God. I have no clue. God did it. Magic force, magic force, magic force, magic force. That's all you have, asshole.
Simples. You have a body obeying the somewhat mystifying 90-degree circle rule or something.
Okay, so again, you explain it, and what does he do? He just says somehow that is a concept he can't understand. A polarized filter. He can't understand that would be a mechanism that would explain it all. That could be just, oh, it's such a key ingredient. And even though it's in every one of Maxwell's equations, even though that phenomenon is the proven function of the universe, the fact that the electron produces the perpendicular energy when it's moving, and he talks about it like it's trivial. No, that's the essence of the function. That's what makes our economy, so to speak. That is what makes our economy, to quote Professor Lewin. Right there, that is how you trap energy. That's how you keep it in a butty. And he trivializes it. He doesn't demonstrate how it truly is Sasquatchian, how that's just too bizarre. Oh, I mean, that's like Martian logic. Things getting trapped in circles? That's fucking insane Martian logic. No, he doesn't demonstrate how that's crazy, that's stupid, that couldn't be. And his counter argument is, believe in my fairies. Believe in my leprechauns with space buckets.
A piece of force, Mendon force, comes along and it joins the crew, somewhat mysteriously.
He's again arguing somehow mysteriously when we know that atoms have geometry, that there's nothing mysterious, that there's all kinds of hard, real geometry that takes place that makes a bond strong or a bond weak, based on there being 5 electrons versus 4 electrons, based on an idea that would mean the shell would be higher or lower, more dense, covering more space, covering less space. I mean, no, it can't be anything like that. I mean, he mocks a perfectly rational explanation because he's just a petty asshole. Again, if Feynman said it, he'd be, oh, that's fucking brilliant. He wouldn't say, oh, that's rubbish. He'd say, oh, gee, it was so simple and it was right there in front of us all along. Yeah, it takes geniuses to figure this stuff out, huh?
Under all these rules, the rules is that it continues.
4 rules. The whole universe in 4 fucking rules. A checkerboard with 4 fucking rules. And he's complaining. When they have 170 different little particles, they have antis and strange and quirky, and I mean they have all this bullshit, and he's complaining about 4 fucking rules.
To believe and obey the instructions to follow the 90-degree rule at this point and continue.
You're right, they don't have to follow it or obey it. As I pointed out, if I just make them into actual triangle shapes, 2 triangles crashing into each other, you know, and they have no actual point because it's the real physics, you know what I mean? Real physics, the real point would be infinitesimally small, so the probability is they slide off each other's arrow angle, and that would create a right turn. Right there. So I'm just saying there's simple ways to explain how it can happen through simple geometry, and yet again he doesn't pay any attention to it. It answers the fundamental question in physics, and yet what is he doing? He's just trying to evade it. He's trying to avoid it being the truth. It provides the simplest possible answer to the longest held mystery in physics, and he just is deliberately and willfully trying to avoid it being the truth. He's trying to make it not true.
And somehow, now, they've all agreed to move a little bit more next time.
So again, they've all agreed. Now, there's no all agreeing. They're simple, dumb little mechanical devices running in a pinball machine. You can't understand that the rules of the pinball machine make it impossible for them to agree or do any of that stuff. They just do, if red hits blue, there's a rule. If blue hits red, there's a rule. It's not that fucking complicated, asshole. It's hard geometry with simple rules. And look at him, evade it. It has every characteristic of what physics should look like. And he's fucking saying, he's pretending it's vomit worthy. What an asshole. I mean, you just can't get a more gaping asshole.
This way. And a little bit more this way next time. Oh, a little bit more this time. All because we got an extra member in the crew.
There's not an extra member in the crew, so to speak. There's an exchange, as pointed out before. Something leaves, something goes in. Well, when you're storing energy, yes, there's an extra member. Sorry. Okay. So when you're collecting force, that is, you're storing it like a battery or something, yes, you're actually collecting it. But you're usually collecting it in the form of electrons, not force.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite explained, really.
All right. Well, I'll do
And
so. I'll do some more redundant videos then. Reference to the website again, where the drawings are explicit. Okay, in terms of the rules of motion, in terms of the polarization, the very polarization that creates a completely a very rich explanation of why two magnets attract and why magnets repel. A rich, complete explanation of why they move. All right, so it does that. The same explanation does that.
Understanding the criticism or the failure in your own theory.
So again, he claims there's a failure in this logic when again you can draw it and it's on the website. The drawings are there of the interactions and it shows how the pressure increases. That explains how you get photons like X-rays, because an electron moves too close to another electron and creates a higher frequency of vibration between it. The little bits start vibrating quicker and quicker. It's a rich explanation of the origin of a photon. Not a superficial or completely vague. It's rich as an explanation. It fits the evidence well. It's very much the impression of the footprint. You can read Bruno Magli in the footprint.
Now lastly, I'll deal with this notion of, and it's an intuitive objection. It's intuitive because you're not understanding.
Like he did something in this video. Lastly,
if I make a statement like,
oh, sorry.
One might intuit that somehow, and in one sense it's true, and in another sense it's not. There is energy that needs to be accounted for in the fact of these lines of force.
Yeah, that makes sense. If there's a line of force, it has to be accounted for. Where did it come from? What's it made out of? What do you mean it forces? How does it force? By doing what exactly? Making space?
The fact that this South Pole, or let's even just say a piece of steel, should be a red, just a block piece of steel, will mysteriously,
again, no mysterious about it. We understand how it happens. We understand the domains. We understand the atoms are all geometrically, they have a geometry to them, which means if you align them all, they have a tail and a head, so to speak, where there's a proton end and an electron heavy end. And therefore you have the source of a magnet. You have a little tiny magnet with an atom that has that arrangement. And if you put a bunch of the little magnets all together, all arranged the same way, so they're not arranged in ways that counter each other's influence, so they're all arranged the same way, they create a real object that has now the capacity to be a magnet. So understand there's a difference between being a magnet, which an electron's doing and a proton is doing, and magnetism, which is the expression of how the force is changed in direction. The right turn takes place. All of the stuff is polarized, so it goes one direction. The segregation of force bits. All the reds end up being pushed one way, all the blacks go the other way. Well, they don't. Again, the density problem. We're talking about something so tiny and minute. They just exchange, but it can appear as if stuff is being moved, you know, in the sense that a red one came in here and it migrated up here and came out here. That's not really what happens. But in theory, I mean in truth, okay, that it spread an influence through the magnet and the end result was the out. So yes, it was converted into a wave in the medium, you could argue, and that was again released to the real universe, not as a wave, but as a corpuscle of force.
Accelerate towards the North Pole. May make you think that there's some energy to be accounted for. But this is a conservative force.
So again, just the same excuse as gravity. It's a conservative force if you think of it as a closed system. So you can just pretend that the energy you got moving the two magnets together is the same energy it would take to pull them apart, and so therefore you don't have to account for the actual energy. When we know to pull them apart, I have to come in from the external world and make that happen. I have to apply a force. The magnet can't do it. Something has to turn the magnet over, reverse the poles, something has to change the system. So it's not technically conservative in that sense, that something has to allow that conservation to be revealed. And the conservation is just made out of the equal but opposite force idea, that there's two forces that they're equal and opposite and they'll cancel. But that doesn't mean the forces never existed. Newton would never say that because there's two forces that crash into each other and completely annihilate each other with no consequence, in the sense that the two forces cancel out in some passive way, that therefore there was no force. You still have to account for it. It's real movement. It's not non-movement, and there has to be a real mechanism that makes it happen. And this pretense, well, I'll just say because it takes the same, because the opposite reaction is it's still in the local environment, therefore I don't have to account for the force. So it's like a fire and the smoke is trapped because of air pressure, so the whole thing only happens in one little tiny location, and therefore we can pretend there was no fire because the smoke didn't go anywhere else. No, there was a real fire.
And in a very real orthodox sense, there's no energy to be got from it in this situation.
Again, it's not about getting energy from it. It's about explaining motion, the laws of motion. And you're just basically saying we have a pretend force that makes our motion, and then we give it back later. It's just pretend. It's borrowing from the future. It's that all of your quantum mechanics is based on this fake notion of this fake energy that, yes, you give it back again somewhere in the equation. But giving it back doesn't mean it wasn't real. So again, that's your explanation. It's not real motion somehow because it didn't require a real force to create it. You're the one saying F doesn't equal ma. There's no force involved somehow.
You see, the work done, another concept that I could quite reasonably assume he has no conception of what energy is and what work done is. See, the work done on this piece of steel body.
There's no point in having a conversation, right? So why should I even accept that kind of nonsense from a person who has no theory? He has no explanation for what's moving one magnet towards the other magnet. There's no mechanism for the motion. He's giving you nothing as an explanation. It's just magical stuff. That's his explanation. And he'll tell somebody else they have no concept of work or this or that. He's the one saying the two magnets moved, and it's as if they didn't move because there's no real mechanism that caused them to move. No real mechanism of any kind.
Is not energy got and cannot be energy got. Because when it goes, to get it, you have to do the same amount of work to get it back to where it was. Net energy as a number that can be got.
Yes, that's true of every bit of energy in the universe then. So why don't we just do that? We'll just take the whole universe and make it a closed system. And yes, for everything that's going right, there's something going left by conservation laws. So we can just say the entire universe has no motion and is doing absolutely nothing, and nothing is happening in the entire universe. No checkers are moving in the entire universe, because for every checker that's going right, there's always a checker going left. Because the force laws require that equilibrium. That is, the giant flame comes out of the shuttle has to move in the opposite direction. Because that's a force law. We'll just close the whole universe and declare nothing's happening, nothing's moving, by your theory. And that's all he's doing here. He's just saying because I can draw a circle around it, create a closed system, therefore I don't have to account for the movement taking place inside the system. So we don't have to account for any of the motion in the universe. None of it's really real. None of it really happens. There's nothing called a force, because they're balanced forces in the sense that you're always in the real universe. There's just as many tails as there are heads. And in circumstances, you can pile up a bunch of heads over here and a bunch of tails over here. Polarization, by the way. And you can make the universe look like there's different levels of energy and force. But there really isn't happening by his definition, because it's a closed system, and If I smash it all together, all the tails will annihilate all the heads. So we don't have to talk about it. We don't have to explain it. That's how he does physics. That's how physics does physics. This is their bullshit. This is the crap you're buying. When you say yes to their bullshit, when you say, "Oh, well, they're so smart, they must know what they're doing," this is the explanation you're buying into. That's how fucking stupid it is. You're saying yes to that. Idiotic, hypocritical, and duplicitous cop-out. Where when it's convenient to them, they'll do something they won't do to the whole universe. They'll never do that to the whole universe and claim, well, because all the forces equal out, we won't pay any attention to any physics whatsoever. Obviously, they don't do that to the whole universe. But they'll do it to their little closed systems because they have no explanation. Clean. No explanation. So they cop out with a duplicitous standard that they don't apply to the entire universe. Yes, energy is conservational in the whole universe as well. That doesn't mean stuff doesn't move, and it doesn't mean it requires a force to make it move. Where's your force, fuckhead? Where's the force that moves the magnets? Where's the force that moves the Earth?
Equaling zero. Similarly for gravity as another conservative force. Now, we do get to use gravity to gain energy, yeah, to do work, and we do use magnets, rotating them, to get energy and work. And it's another question. And
so again, using them has nothing to do with it. The question is, we put them in a position and they do something just by being placed in the position. They're actually generating the future permutations of their destiny. Okay, they don't need a force. You don't have to push the magnets into each other. They move into each other without any help, just by putting in location, by putting in proximity to each other. So the force is entirely in them. Yes, we can use that mechanism to create more energy and more force. We can convert our circular motion into electricity, for example. So yes, we can do conversions using magnetism, but the actual mechanism that is allowing that to take place, which is the tension created between the two magnets, that tension is a real mechanism, and you have no explanation for it, and I do. I explain why it happens. You provide chirp, 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 cricket, cricket. What? You asked a question? That's what you have.
More complex explanation needed. They're not going to go into here, all right? But the fact that there is a distinction, and what the distinctions are, and how energy arises, and that there's something that needs to be discussed in orthodox theory and in DraftScience theory to understand the distinctions of how, in a sense, we have to...
Again, I've already done this, all right? Polarization solves the problem. It's a material universe. Gravity is a material force. And I've explained it in detail how it works. It's actually called Mach gravity because it works so well to do gravity. And I've explained why there really isn't a problem with friction with the field, the ether. There is no friction problem. So I've done all this. It's just silly to say I need to do it. I've done it.
Beat the conservative nature of certain forces. Well, this is. It actually runs in nicely. I was thinking I'd forgotten it, and physicists often say, it's all right if there's problems with your physics and it disagrees with experiments and this, that, and the other, but it better not disagree with the second law of thermodynamics.
And again, I don't disagree with any of the thermodynamic laws. I don't disagree with any of the conservation laws. There's nothing in my theory that creates any unaccountable energy, any unaccountable motion. There's no unaccounted for motion in my theory. It's just another one of his perpetual and inevitable and compulsive lies to imply otherwise. He's just a compulsive, petty liar. He can't win a rational argument. All he can do is make fake claims and false assertions, and it's just disgusting that he gets away with being a compulsive fucking liar on the internet.
And I would say, and I'll give better account another time maybe, but this explanation of how bodies move, and again I'll say that there's no explanation of how bodies are consistent.
Again, I don't know what this is. Again, we're back to bodies. Electrons, protons, and force bits. That's it. Electron, proton, force bit. That's the universe. No bodies.
That remain intact as a body under DraftScience. This notion of just simply capturing and the ability to capture, yeah?
I've explained, again, go to the website, look at the diagrams of the electrons and the protons and their function. He's saying somehow that doesn't explain attraction and repulsion between electrons and protons in their environment. Of course it does. Quite well. It explains how the tension is created between the elemental bits.
Without explanation, just on the face of it, very much appears to break the second law of thermodynamics.
Complete lie. Like I said, he'll provide no evidence of any law breaking anywhere in the theory. It's just an assertion that of no evidence provided. Absolutely zero evidence provided of this assertion. Just boldly asserts a fucking lie. It's a fucking lie because there's no evidence and he knows it, and that's why he provides no evidence. He just asserts it. He has no fucking logically presented evidence of any problem created by my theory in terms of breaking thermodynamics. It's just a fucking lie. There's no magical energy anywhere in the mechanism. There has to be a bit, a force bit, or there is no action. All the action is created by the interaction between the force and the matter, and nowhere in my theory do I have any sources of fake force or magical force anywhere.
And it is because of the second law that in a reservoir in a mountain we get to pipe down and drive a turbine, yeah, and get work, or by rotating a magnet, yeah, utilising gravity and magnetic forces to gain what for us is productive work.
We can't gain productive work in the sense that you have to always put force in. It's just a conversion. You're just exchanging one kind of energy for another kind of energy. And in the case of things that have stored energy, you're releasing the stored energy. We don't do work pulling oil out of the ground in the sense that the pulling of it out of the ground doesn't give the oil energy. The work is just to put it in an environment where we can just let it go, because it's stored in batteries. It's a battery. Okay? An atom is a battery. That's why we can create nuclear power. It has nothing to do with the energy we put in terms of running the pump motors and all of that stuff. None of the energy we put in has anything to do with the energy we get out. It just has to do with the control mechanisms necessary to break an atom. But it doesn't make the atom more energetic. So it has nothing to do with a direct conversion where we put electricity in and we create spinning motion out. The idea is that we create an environment where we can just put a neutron in, blow up an atom, and get 10 zillion times more energy than we put in out because it's a battery. Dumbass.
But in a very real sense, we've just complexified the whole of Earth a little bit more. Yeah? In a very real sense, there was never anything gained.
We complexified. Yes, yeah, well, that's right. It is a little bit complex, but the truth is that gravity is a real force that we can tap because it's going one way at the present time. We're not doing the going away from the sun. We're doing the going towards, and there's real energy to be tapped. So we can steal some of the force of gravity, the change in position. We can convert it into spinning or some other kind of thing. And the same is true for the velocity of the Earth around the sun. We could steal some of that velocity. We do it. We steal the velocity of the moon by orbiting it and slingshotting. That's what slingshotting is. You're stealing some of the velocity of the moon.
Second law was still observed, and Earth become that bit more disordered. It's just that we recognise in dropping this water through this turbine, spinning this magnet, and oiling our kettle, We call that work which was useful to us, right? And
yes, but in that circumstance, it's not a battery. So to get that work, you have to first lift. Something had to lift it up. And we know that the mountain doesn't get magically lifted. It gets lifted by a huge amount of energy inside of the earth trying to, pressure. And that the water doesn't get on top of the mountain because we put it there. No, we know that all this energy in the atmosphere and the heat of the atmosphere is what put the water up there. Okay, and we're just capitalizing off something else that did the work of putting the water in the location that's convenient for us to steal the energy of the water as it returns to the earth. So we're going to steal some of its acceleration, some of its velocity. We're going to pull some of that out. It's going to move slower down to the surface, and by making it go slower, it means that we can take the difference, the speed difference, as gained energy. But there's no conservation violation, and there's certainly nothing in my theory that makes any of that. Oh, that can't possibly happen. So again, this argument that somehow my theory is incompatible with an understanding of gravity as a conservative force is such a fucking lie. Just keep lying some more, fatty.
We prize that work done in preference to the grand scheme of what's happened, wherein nothing was really gained. It was interesting. I forget. There's the
again. What Einstein says this is a subject. Again, does somebody think the oil in the ground, the energy, is from nothing? No, we know it's from millions of years of solar energy. Oil is solar. It's millions of years of solar collection.
4 laws of thermodynamics. The second discussed. And I'm going to look this up again, but somebody once said, probably Susskind.
So again, he mocked the battery idea, the circle, the trapping of energy in a 4 right turn square or a circle. He mocked that idea, and yet he's demonstrating how he doesn't understand the idea. That's how energy gets trapped in matter. It falls into these cul-de-sacs, and it stays in them until somebody makes the off-ramp.
The first law says you can never win. Yeah? You can never win. The second one says you can't even break even.
Yes, that's right. It starts with a 0. The universe, we will assume, but we're only assuming, is equally balanced. Now, it could be going 50 miles an hour more in one direction than the other. It could actually have more heads than tails, but we're just assuming for the purpose of reason. Who cares? It wouldn't matter one way or the other, because everything would be affected by that tide. Every density of the universe would have the same imbalance, so you'd never be able to see it. But maybe it's there. Maybe if I could really read this flashlight, I'd find out in the end that it doesn't come out. That there's not some parallel flashlight moving exactly the opposite or all that kind of crap. And that there actually is a signature of some built-in extra in one direction. That the universe has a bias in a direction. But who cares? Again, there's absolutely no evidence of a universal bias, so why presume one? And yes, every closed system we can make, we understand the conservation law is that it's always going to come out to a net 0 if the system isn't moving. Everything in it will 0 out if it's not in motion. Exactly consistent with my theory. Exactly consistent. I mean, not just a little bit consistent, completely consistent with my collection of arrow theory. My school of fish analogy. Completely consistent with it. The fish move the school. If the school isn't moving, then all the fish are equaling out. They're all balanced in their motion.
And I think you might have said that it's rather pithy and probably not true or whatever, but it's nice. The third one says don't even try or something like that. So yeah. There we have it. More trying to put Mendham in his place.
Right. Yeah, you'll be put in your place, okay? Again, you're just demonstrating, you're proving my point. that these people aren't by preserving reason and logic and intelligence, they're not preserving the truth or protecting the truth from cranks and silly people. They're aggressively obnoxious to anything but their religion. They're no better than Islamic lunatics. They're fucking fanatics for silly explanations. They love their traditional silly explanations. They're so glued to them, and they're so familiar to them, and they just pet them and love them so much, and they don't want to hear, that their favorite chinchilla is really just a New York rat. They just don't want to hear the truth.
Most importantly, the reason I do this is the thought that somebody entertains what he says as being educational frightens me and terrifies me. And
the truth. Yes, that somebody has a truth different than you, that would frighten you. That's right, because you're a fucking fanatic and you have a preposterous sense of your own competence, where you have failed dismally over and over and over again, and I do nothing but fucking succeed, in the sense that your arguments get sillier and more vacuous, mine get deeper and more detailed, and it happens throughout all these conversations on the internet. I win, you fucking lose. Fact. And the more you people lose, the more petty you become, the more like some New York Yankees fan, you just start throwing bottles at the other team's players because you can't win a fair fight. You're done, you're cooked, you're humiliated, and your desperation just says, well, I'm going to go full retard instead of just a half retard. I might as well go all the fucking way, since you've already humiliated yourself. You might as well stick your dick all the way up the fucking badger ass.
What I like, and what I think is funny and ironic, is he thinks that his grand unification theory is going to be a platform which is going to allow him to stand with more credibility in his philosophies. That's one of the best.
Well, I don't know. You don't think there's a parallel between being demonstrated to be qualified and winning a Nobel Prize? So Einstein wasn't more respected as a philosopher because he won a Nobel Prize. That's your theory. Winning a Nobel Prize doesn't mean people listen to you. There used to be a commercial for some stockbroker company. When E.F. Hutton talks, everybody listens. Because, if you're right about a few things, you gain credibility, everybody starts listening to you. That's right. Gee, you didn't figure that out? That I might become a little bit famous by winning a Nobel Prize, and that I might be able to get on CNN, and I might be able to have a conversation with Larry King's zombie corpse or something? That might be possible, jackass? Yeah, I think it might be possible, fuckhead. He thinks that's a laughable theory. He really is just as like winning an Oscar doesn't make you, isn't going to help you as a creative artist. It's not going to get your paintings looked at anymore. You won't be able to work. It's not really good for your work projects. Getting something done, your creative projects won't be much more likely to get made if you win an Oscar.
Reasons for refuting him, to my mind.
To your mind. Again, you've already declared your mind retarded, so I don't know why somebody could care what. Let's go hear what the retard says. So anyway. Fuck you, asshole. God, you're just such a sack of smelly scum as a thinker. Putrid bullshit. It's all you got. Putrefied bullshit as an argument.